Hello and welcome. Tonight we're stepping into the chilling, blood-soaked annals of Eastern European history, into a realm where fact.
The year is 1442. You are not a peasant, nor a noble. You are Vlad, the second son of Vlad Dracula, Prince of Wallachia, and you are about to embark on a journey that will shape you into one of history's most feared figures. The good news, if you can call it that, is you're alive. The bad news, you're a political hostage, and your captors are the Ottoman Turks. Your childhood, if it can be called that, was already marked by the volatile, blood-soaked politics of 15th century Wallachia. This small principality was a perpetual battleground, a strategic pawn caught precariously between the rapidly expanding, terrifying Ottoman Empire to the south and the ambitious, often unreliable, Kingdom of Hungary to the north. Your father, Vlad Dracula, meaning the dragon, or increasingly the devil in Old Romanian, was a member of the prestigious Order of the Dragon, a chivalric order founded to fight the Ottomans. Yet he was a cunning, often opportunistic ruler, constantly shifting allegiances, making desperate pacts, and betraying former allies to maintain his precarious throne in a land where loyalty was a fleeting concept. You and your younger brother Radu were merely pawns in this dangerous, high-stakes game of survival. The air of the Wallachian court, even in your earliest memories, was thick with suspicion, whispered conspiracies, and the constant threat of assassination or invasion. Every day was a lesson in the precariousness of power. In 1442, in a desperate attempt to secure peace, and, more importantly, his own fragile position against both Hungarian and Ottoman threats, your father made a fateful decision. He handed you and Radu over to the formidable Sultan Murad II as hostages. This wasn't a friendly exchange of diplomatic goodwill. This was a forced education in the heart of the enemy's empire, a brutal guarantee of your father's loyalty, a binding contract written in the flesh and blood of his sons. You were roughly 11 years old, barely a boy, thrust into a world of immense power and constant danger. Your brother, Radu, was even younger, perhaps 7 or 8. The memory of your father's desperate, calculating gaze as he gave you away, and the bewildered, frightened face of your little brother clinging to your tunic would likely haunt your sleep for years to come, etching themselves into your very soul. The silence of the journey, broken only by the rhythmic creak of the carts and the foreign tongue of your escorts, must have been deafening. Your home, for the next 6 years, was not a comfortable palace designed for princely comfort and leisure. It was a gilded cage within the opulent, yet terrifying Ottoman court, likely in grand cities like Edirne or Tokat, bustling centers of power and intrigue, filled with the murmur of 1,000 languages and the scent of exotic spices. While you might have been treated with a certain degree of respect due to your princely status, you were, after all, a potential future ruler, a valuable asset in the Sultan's geopolitical chess game. You were never truly free. Every meal served by silent attendants, every lesson delivered by stern tutors, every interaction, carefully observed by the Sultan's watchful eyes and his countless informants, was a stark reminder of your captivity, a constant, unspoken threat hanging over your head like a sharpened sword. Disobedience from your father, a sudden shift in political winds in Wallachia, or even a simple, capricious whim from the Sultan could mean your swift, brutal execution, a fate you knew was always a breath away.
The air itself likely felt heavy with the weight of unseen eyes, fostering a deep-seated paranoia that would become a defining characteristic of your adult life. You learned to observe, to listen, to trust no one, to mask your emotions, and to understand the subtle currents of power that flowed through the Ottoman court. The education you received was comprehensive and brutally effective, far more practical and ruthless than any European court could offer its young princes. You learned Turkish, the language of your captors, becoming fluent in their tongue. You learned Arabic, the language of their faith, and the intricate nuances of Islamic culture, law, and diplomacy, gaining an invaluable, intimate understanding of your captors' worldview, their motivations, their strengths, and their vulnerabilities. You studied logic, philosophy, and the Quran, not out of devotion, but out of a need to comprehend the minds of those who held your life in their hands. But more importantly, you received a first-hand masterclass in Ottoman warfare, administration, and statecraft. You witnessed the immense, terrifying power of the Sultan's army, their disciplined janissaries, elite infantry forged from Christian boys, a chilling example of conversion and absolute loyalty, a fate you narrowly avoided. You saw their advanced siege engines, monstrous machines capable of crumbling the strongest fortresses in Europe with ease. You observed how a vast, multi-ethnic empire was governed with an iron fist, how dissent was crushed ruthlessly and efficiently, and how loyalty was enforced through a potent blend of fear and reward. You learned the art of psychological warfare, the devastating effectiveness of terror as a tool of governance, observing how public displays of cruelty could break the will of entire populations. You saw impalement, a common Ottoman punishment for rebels and enemies, not as a distant rumor from travelers' tales, but as a grim, visceral reality, perhaps even witnessing its application firsthand in the public squares. The screams of the dying echoing in your young ears, a sound that would forever be seared into your memory. This period was profoundly formative, scarring your psyche but forging your will into something unyielding and cold, harder than any steel. You saw your father, who had sworn to fight the Ottomans, betray his vows for mere survival, a bitter lesson in the ultimate pragmatism of power and the fleeting nature of oaths, a betrayal that would breed a deep-seated contempt for weakness. You learned that mercy was not a virtue, but a fatal weakness, a dangerous sentiment in a brutal world that demanded an even greater brutality for survival, a lesson you would apply with chilling precision. You developed a deep, intimate, almost instinctive understanding of your enemy, their strengths and weaknesses, their strategies and their vulnerabilities, a knowledge that would serve you well, perhaps too well, in the future. But it also instilled in you a profound sense of paranoia, a distrust of everyone, allies, family, and subjects alike, and a burning, insatiable desire for absolute, unquestioned control over your own destiny and domain, a hunger for power that would consume you. Your younger brother, Radu, adapted more easily to the luxuries and customs of the Ottoman court, even converting to Islam and becoming a favored companion of the Sultan's son, Mehmed, a betrayal that fueled a deep-seated resentment and a divergence that would sow the bitter seeds of future conflict.
When you were finally released in 1448, it was not a joyous homecoming, a triumphant return of a prince to his adoring people. It was a calculated, cynical move by the Ottomans, who had just seen your father and elder brother Nircha brutally assassinated by Wallachian boyars loyal to Hungary. Wallachia was in chaos, ripe for manipulation, a power vacuum waiting to be filled. You were sent back, not as a sovereign ruler, but as an Ottoman puppet, a tool to further destabilize Wallachia and ensure its submission to the Porte. The years of captivity had stripped away your innocence, replacing it with a hardened, calculating mind. a man who understood the language of power, and who would soon speak it with a terrifying, unforgettable clarity that would echo through the centuries. Your journey into the heart of darkness had just begun, and Wallachia would soon feel its chilling embrace, a land about to be reshaped by the lessons learned in an Ottoman cage. You've returned from your gilded cage, a pawn in a larger, deadlier game. The year is now 1448, and Wallachia is not merely chaotic, it is a fractured, bleeding land, a prize constantly fought over by internal factions and external powers. Your father, Vlad Dracula, and your elder brother Mircea have been brutally murdered by the boyars, the powerful local nobility who, like predatory wolves, constantly shifted allegiances between the expanding Ottoman Empire and the ambitious Kingdom of Hungary. Wallachia is a prize, and every ambitious noble, every neighboring ruler wants a piece of its strategic territory and its resources, often at the expense of its people, who suffered under the constant instability. The good news? The Ottomans, seeing an opportunity to install a compliant ruler who owed them everything, have installed you as prince. The bad news? You're a puppet, a temporary placeholder, and everyone, from your own subjects to your supposed allies, knows it. Your position is precarious, your power illusory, and your very life hangs by a thread. Your first reign is predictably brief, a mere shadow of power lasting only a few tumultuous months. The Hungarian-backed claimant, Vladislav II, quickly drives you out, asserting his own claim with military force and the support of the boyars who despise your Ottoman backing. You flee, a hunted man, a prince without a throne, forced to wander through the rugged, unforgiving lands of Moldavia and Transylvania, seeking refuge and plotting your return. This period of exile, from 1448 to 1456, is not wasted. It hardens your resolve, fuels your already burgeoning paranoia, and sharpens your understanding of the treacherous, cutthroat political landscape of Eastern Europe. You witness firsthand the fickleness of allies who abandon you when convenient, the ruthless ambition of rivals who would see you dead, and the overwhelming, insatiable desire for power that drives everyone in this brutal world. You learn the ultimate, bitter lesson: to trust no one, to rely only on yourself and your own ruthless will, and to strike first always with overwhelming, decisive force, leaving no room for doubt or future challenge. In 1456, the stars align, offering a glimmer of opportunity, a chance to reclaim what you believe is rightfully yours, not as a puppet, but as a true sovereign. The mighty Ottomans are distracted by the crucial siege of Belgrade, a massive undertaking that diverts their attention and resources away from Wallachia, leaving it vulnerable. Vladislav II, your rival, is away, perhaps campaigning or consolidating his own power, leaving Wallachia's defenses weakened. You seize your chance, invading Wallachia with newfound Hungarian support, a temporary alliance of convenience, as you well know, a pact that could be broken at any moment, and reclaim your throne. This time, however, the script is different. This time, you are not a puppet to be manipulated by foreign powers or internal factions. This time, you are here to stay, and you will ensure no one, absolutely no one, ever challenges your authority again. Your ascension is marked by an immediate, brutal, and systematic consolidation of power, a reign of terror designed to obliterate any opposition, to make Wallachia a land where only your will reigns supreme, a land cleansed of disloyalty.
Your first target, the most dangerous and insidious threat to your rule, the boyars. These powerful noble families who had murdered your father and brother, who had constantly undermined princely authority with their shifting loyalties and private armies, are now in your sights. You invite them to a feast, a grand Easter celebration, ostensibly to bury old grievances, to forge new alliances, and to unite the country under your leadership. They arrive in their finest clothes, their silks and furs rustling, their faces beaming with false smiles, expecting reconciliation, perhaps even new favors and positions of power, oblivious to the trap. What they get is a meticulously planned act of vengeance and political cleansing that would become legendary in its brutality, a chilling warning to all. The feast is lavish, a deceptive display of hospitality designed to lull them into a false sense of security. The finest wines flow freely, the food is abundant, and the atmosphere is deceptively jovial, filled with forced smiles, polite conversation, and the clinking of goblets. But as the meal concludes, as the boyars relax into their false sense of security, perhaps discussing future plots or alliances, your true intentions are revealed with chilling precision. Your personal guards, loyal only to you, hardened men who have seen your ruthlessness firsthand, quietly surround the hall, blocking all exits. The older boyars, those directly implicated in your family's murder, those whose faces you remember from your childhood nightmares, are immediately seized. They are dragged screaming from the hall and impaled on freshly cut stakes erected just outside the castle walls, a grim, agonizing spectacle for all to see. Their dying cries echoing across the courtyard, a terrifying symphony of vengeance that would resonate for generations. This is not just punishment, it is a terrifying, unforgettable message, a public declaration of your absolute, unyielding power, a lesson etched in blood. The younger, healthier boyars, those who might still be useful, those whose strength you could exploit for your own ends, are not killed outright. Instead, you force them on a brutal, forced march over 100 miles, through treacherous terrain, over mountains, through dense forests, across icy rivers, to the desolate, crumbling ruins of Poinade Citadel, a dilapidated fortress high in the rugged Carpathian Mountains. They are forced to rebuild it with their bare hands, without rest, without proper food, without adequate tools, driven by your relentless will and the ever-present threat of the stake. They labor under the constant threat of your overseers, their bodies breaking, until their fine clothes literally rot off their bodies, and their strength gives out, their hands bleeding, their bodies broken, their spirits crushed. Many die from sheer exhaustion, from disease, from starvation, or from falls from the treacherous, unfinished cliffs, their bones becoming part of the fortress's foundation. Poinade becomes your impregnable stronghold, your personal eagle's nest, a chilling testament to your ruthless will, a fortress built on the broken backs and shattered lives of your enemies, a symbol of your absolute dominance. This act, known as the Easter Massacre, effectively and brutally breaks the power of the old boyar families, replacing them with loyalists and commoners who owe their positions, their very lives, solely to you, ensuring their unwavering obedience and preventing any future challenges. You also turn your attention to the prosperous merchants of Brasov and Sibiu, Saxon traders who had long enjoyed special privileges, often engaged in smuggling, evaded Wallachian taxes, and undermined your authority through their immense wealth and connections to Hungarian nobility. You invite them to Wallachia, promising safe passage and lucrative trade opportunities, enticing them with the prospect of riches and a stable environment. Then, in a chilling display of calculated treachery, you seize their goods, imprison them, and, in a public square, impale hundreds of them, their screams mingling with the cries of their dying countrymen, a horrifying spectacle designed to instill terror and usurp your economic control. This sends a clear, unmistakable message across the Transylvanian border and throughout the region. Wallachia will trade on your terms. Your laws will be obeyed without question, and any defiance, any attempt to circumvent your authority will be met with unimaginable horror, regardless of wealth or influence. Your rule is absolute, unquestioned, enforced by fear and a pervasive network of spies and informants. Wallachia, once a fractured, chaotic land, constantly torn by internal strife and foreign interference, is now unified under your iron fist. There is order, yes, but it is an order born of terror, a silence enforced by the omnipresent shadow of the stake. You have eliminated your rivals, secured your borders, and established yourself as the undisputed master of your domain, a prince whose name is whispered with dread and awe across all Eastern Europe. The dragon has truly ascended, and his shadow falls long and dark across Wallachia, a land now bound by fear, awaiting his every command, a land where every subject knows their place. You've consolidated your power, crushing internal dissent and asserting your will over merchants and boyars with chilling efficiency. You've established a reign built on absolute obedience. But your name, Vlad Țepeș, Vlad the Impaler, is etched into the blood-soaked pages of history, not just for your political cunning or strategic brilliance, but for your signature, horrifying method of punishment, a method that would define your legacy. This wasn't just execution. It was a terrifying public spectacle, a calculated act of psychological warfare designed to instill absolute, unwavering obedience and strike paralyzing fear into the hearts of your enemies and subjects alike. It was, in your eyes, an art form, a grim masterpiece of terror, a living, dying monument to your absolute authority, a message carved into the very landscape. Forget the quick mercy of a hangman's noose, the clean cut of a guillotine, an invention centuries in the future, or the swift blade of a headsman. Impalement was a slow, agonizing death, designed to prolong suffering, maximize terror, and serve as a living, breathing warning to anyone who dared to defy the dragon. The victim was forced onto a thick wooden stake, which was often blunted, not sharpened to a point. This blunting was crucial as it prevented immediate fatal injury, ensuring a longer, more agonizing descent. The stake, sometimes smeared with grease or animal fat to aid the process, would then be slowly raised upright, leaving the victim to slide down under their own agonizing weight, their bodies slowly pierced and stretched, their internal organs ruptured, their life force slowly draining away. Death could take hours, even days, from shock, excruciating pain, blood loss, or organ failure as the stake slowly, inexorably worked its way through the body, often emerging through the mouth, chest, or shoulder, transforming the victim into a grotesque living sculpture of agony. It was a death by 1,000 internal cuts, a prolonged public agony that served as a horrifying, unforgettable lesson for all who witnessed it.
The stakes themselves varied in gruesome detail, reflecting Vlad's perverse ingenuity and his desire to maximize the psychological impact. Sometimes they were sharpened to a point, designed for a quicker, though still brutal, penetration, perhaps for those who had committed lesser offenses or whom Vlad wished to dispatch more swiftly, a small mercy. Other times they were rounded, specifically designed to enter the rectum or vagina and slowly emerge through the mouth, chest, or shoulder, carefully avoiding vital organs for as long as possible to prolong the torment. A truly sadistic refinement that spoke volumes about his cruelty. The height of the stakes could also vary, creating a macabre forest of suffering, a chilling landscape where some victims were impaled higher than others, a visual hierarchy of your wrath, a stark display of your power and the severity of their transgression. The sight of a child impaled on a smaller stake beside an adult was not uncommon, emphasizing the universality of your justice and the fact that no one was exempt from your wrath, regardless of age or status. And the victims? Anyone who dared to defy you, traitors who plotted against your rule, rebellious boyars who challenged your authority, foreign spies who infiltrated your lands, common criminals who dared to steal a loaf of bread, even those who simply lied, committed minor infractions, or showed insufficient respect. But Vlad also used impalement as a tool of social order, a grim form of public hygiene and moral cleansing. If someone stole, they were impaled. If someone lied, they were impaled. If someone simply looked at you the wrong way or showed insufficient respect, they might find themselves on a stake. The message was clear, etched in blood and agony for all to see. Crime would not be tolerated, and justice, as defined by Vlad, was swift, absolute, and merciless. A terrifying deterrent that kept Wallachia in a state of enforced peace, where the only sound was the wind whispering through the impaled, carrying their silent screams. One of the most famous instances of this art was in 1462, during the pivotal Ottoman invasion. The mighty Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, a man who had seen countless horrors and was known for his own ruthlessness, marched into Wallachia to depose Vlad. As Mehmed approached Târgoviste, Vlad's capital, he was met not with an army and open battle, but with a horrifying spectacle. A forest of over 20,000 impaled Turks stretching for miles, their bodies rotting in the sun, a grotesque monument to Vlad's unwavering resolve and his willingness to use terror on an unprecedented scale. The sight was so gruesome, so utterly beyond the pale of even Ottoman brutality, that even Mehmed, a hardened conqueror accustomed to such sights, was reportedly sickened and demoralized. He turned back, refusing to continue his campaign, a testament to the sheer psychological power of Vlad's terror, a victory achieved without a single major battle, solely through the power of fear.
Vlad's methods were not entirely unique in the 15th century. Impalement was practiced by the Ottomans and other rulers across Europe. But Vlad elevated it to an art form, using it on an unprecedented scale, with a chillingly systematic approach, and for a wider range of offenses than perhaps any other ruler. He wasn't just executing,
he was sending a message, carving his will into the very landscape with the bodies of his victims, creating a living, dying testament to his absolute authority. This was the dark heart of his rule, the terrifying efficiency that earned him his infamous epithet, a name that would echo through history, inspiring both fear and fascination, forever linking him to the ultimate act of terror and reminding us of the brutal realities of power in the medieval world. You've seen the terror Vlad inflicted on his own people, the chilling efficiency of his justice. But his cruelty was not merely for internal control or personal vengeance. It was a calculated weapon, honed to its sharpest edge against the existential threat of the Ottoman Empire. For Vlad, the struggle against the Turks was not just political maneuvering or territorial dispute. It was a holy war, a desperate, almost suicidal fight for the very survival of Wallachia and, in his mind, Christendom itself. He saw himself as a bulwark, a dragon guarding the gates of Europe, willing to sacrifice everything, including his own humanity, for the cause, believing his brutal methods were divinely sanctioned. Forget the romanticized battles of chivalry where knights met on open fields in glorious, if bloody, single combat, adhering to codes of honor and noble conduct. Warfare in the 15th century was brutal, bloody, and often asymmetric, particularly when a small principality faced a burgeoning empire. The Ottoman Empire was a terrifying superpower, a vast, disciplined military machine that had already conquered the seemingly impregnable Constantinople in 1453, and was relentlessly pushing its formidable armies deeper into Europe, threatening to engulf the entire continent. Wallachia, a small, relatively poor principality, lacking vast resources or a large standing army, was directly in their path, a crucial buffer state constantly threatened with annexation, its independence hanging on a precarious thread, a pawn in a much larger game. Vlad understood the overwhelming numerical superiority of the Ottomans. He knew he could not defeat them in a pitched battle, where their sheer numbers, superior artillery, including the massive cannons that brought down Constantinople's walls, and disciplined janissaries, elite infantry, often Christian converts, fiercely loyal to the Sultan, would simply overwhelm his smaller, less equipped forces. Instead, he employed a scorched earth policy and a relentless campaign of guerrilla warfare, designed not to win decisive battles, but to harass, demoralize, and bleed the invading armies dry, turning Wallachia itself into a weapon against its invaders, making the land as hostile as its ruler. When the Ottomans invaded, Vlad would order the immediate, brutal evacuation of villages and towns in the path of the advancing army. This was a harsh, agonizing command, forcing his own people to abandon their homes, their livelihoods, and often their meager possessions, leaving everything behind. But he saw it as a necessary evil for the greater good of survival, a sacrifice for the nation. He would then systematically destroy crops, poison wells, and burn everything that could provide sustenance or shelter to the enemy: houses, barns, food stores, leaving nothing but desolation and ruin. The land itself became a vast, desolate trap, a barren wasteland designed to starve, exhaust, and disorient the invaders, forcing them to carry all their supplies or starve. This meant immense suffering for his own subjects, who were forced to become refugees in their own land, often dying of exposure or starvation. But Vlad's cold pragmatism superseded any humanitarian concerns, viewing their suffering as a necessary part of the war effort. His military tactics were cunning, unconventional, and utterly ruthless, a reflection of his Ottoman training and his own brutal ingenuity. He avoided direct confrontation,
instead launching lightning raids on Ottoman camps under the cover of darkness, ambushing supply convoys in narrow mountain passes, and striking at enemy foraging parties in narrow mountain passes, and striking at enemy foraging parties. His small, highly mobile forces, composed of loyal boyars and hardened, desperate peasants, would strike swiftly and then disappear into the dense, unforgiving forests and rugged mountains of Wallachia, leaving behind a trail of death, confusion, and terror. They were ghosts in their own land, constantly harassing the larger, slower Ottoman army, denying them rest and resources, chipping away at their morale.
The most famous example of this was his campaign against Sultan Mehmed II in 1462, a true David and Goliath struggle that captured the imagination of Europe. Mehmed, the formidable conqueror of Constantinople, brought an army estimated at 60,000 to 100,000 men, a force many times larger than anything Wallachia could field, confident of a swift victory. Vlad, with perhaps 20,000 men at his disposal, engaged in a brilliant campaign of harassment and psychological warfare. He used hit-and-run tactics, poisoned springs and rivers to deny the Ottomans water, and even unleashed plague victims into the Ottoman camp, attempting to spread disease and panic among their ranks, a truly horrifying form of biological warfare that showed his willingness to use any means necessary. His most audacious and terrifying act was the night attack on June 17, 1462. Under the cover of darkness, Vlad personally led a small elite force of Wallachian soldiers, some reportedly disguised as Turks, into the vast, sprawling Ottoman encampment outside Târgoviște, his capital. Their primary goal was to assassinate Sultan Mehmed II and cause widespread panic and disarray, hoping to decapitate the invading force and send them fleeing. Though they failed to reach the Sultan's heavily guarded tent, they caused immense chaos, slaughtering thousands of Ottoman soldiers and horses in the confusion, before retreating back into the darkness, leaving behind a scene of utter carnage. The attack, though not a decisive military victory in terms of territory gained, shattered Ottoman morale, instilled deep fear, and demonstrated Vlad's terrifying audacity and unpredictability, making the Ottomans question their very safety even within their own camp. And then, of course, there was the Forest of Stakes outside Târgoviște, which we discussed earlier. This grotesque psychological weapon, combined with his relentless guerrilla tactics and the scorched earth policy, made Wallachia a living hell for the invading Ottoman army. The sheer scale of the impalement, the pervasive stench of death, and the constant threat of ambush slowly broke the will of even the hardened Ottoman veterans. Mehmed II, despite his vast resources and military genius, was ultimately forced to withdraw, demoralized, exhausted, and with his army severely depleted, leaving Wallachia to its brutal prince. This was a testament to Vlad's brutal effectiveness and his unique brand of psychological warfare, a victory achieved not through conventional means, but through sheer terror and attrition. A chilling example of how fear can be a more potent weapon than steel. Vlad's resistance, though ultimately unsuccessful in permanently halting Ottoman expansion into Europe, bought crucial time for the Christian states to the west, and earned him a fearsome reputation as a brutal but effective defender of Christendom. He was seen by some as a bloodthirsty tyrant, a monster, but by others, particularly in the Papal States and Hungary, as a heroic, albeit ruthless, champion against the infidel, a necessary evil in a desperate fight for survival. His warfare was not about glory or chivalry, it was about survival,
a desperate, bloody struggle against an overwhelming tide, and he was willing to use any means necessary, no matter how horrific, to achieve it. His methods were a stark reflection of the brutal realities of his time and the existential threat he faced, a chilling example of how far a leader would go to protect his land and his people, even if it meant becoming a monster himself.
You've heard the historical accounts, the grim realities of Vlad the Impaler, a man of calculated cruelty, a fierce warrior, and a pragmatic ruler forged in the crucible of captivity and constant warfare. But how did this 15th century Wallachian prince, a brutal but very human figure, transform into the immortal, blood-drinking monster of legend that haunts our nightmares and pop culture? This is where history bleeds into folklore, where the chilling truth gives way to a terrifying supernatural fantasy, a testament to the enduring power of fear, storytelling, and the human imagination. Forget the dusty historical records for a moment. We're stepping into the realm of Bram Stoker's vivid imagination, an imagination fueled by centuries of dark whispers, distorted truths, and the rich, often terrifying tapestry of Eastern European folklore. The name Dracula itself is the key, the linguistic bridge that connected the historical figure to the monstrous myth. Your father, Vlad Dracul, was a member of the prestigious Order of the Dragon, Societatis Dracunistarum, a chivalric order founded by Sigismund of Luxembourg to fight the Ottomans. In Old Romanian, Dracul meant the dragon, a symbol of power, authority, and often a fearsome, almost demonic force. However, over time, the word also evolved to mean the devil or demon. So, Vlad Țepeș, as his son, became Dracula, which could be interpreted as son of the dragon, or, more ominously, son of the devil. A fitting, almost prophetic name for a man who inspired such widespread terror and who would later be associated with demonic forces and the ultimate evil. This etymological twist was a crucial, if accidental, ingredient in the brewing of the vampire myth. The transformation from impaler to vampire began long before Stoker penned his famous novel. Even during Vlad's own lifetime, his atrocities were widely publicized across Europe, particularly in the German-speaking lands and Russia. Pamphlets, often crudely but graphically illustrated with gruesome woodcuts depicting his impalements, mutilations, and other cruelties, circulated widely. These were early forms of sensationalist media, akin to medieval tabloids, designed to shock, horrify, and demonize him, often at the behest of his political enemies, like the Saxon merchants he had impaled, who had access to printing presses and a vested interest in discrediting him. While these pamphlets undoubtedly exaggerated his cruelty for propaganda purposes, they were based on real events and solidified his reputation as a monstrous tyrant, a bloodthirsty fiend. Crucially, however, these early accounts, despite their lurid details and emphasis on his inhumanity, never mentioned vampirism. They depicted a human monster, a man capable of unimaginable evil, not a supernatural one. The horror was in his very real, earthly actions. The link to vampirism emerged much later, fueled by the rich tapestry of Eastern European folklore and superstition that predated Vlad. The belief in strigoi, undead, revenant beings, often malevolent spirits of the dead who could take human or animal form, or even drain vitality from the living, causing illness or misfortune, and vampires was deeply ingrained in the peasant superstitions of the Balkans and Carpathians. These were not the sophisticated, aristocratic vampires of later fiction, but rather bloated, reanimated corpses, often associated with disease, misfortune, and the disruption of the natural order. Tales of the dead rising from their graves to torment the living, to drain their vitality, to drink their blood and to spread disease were common, passed down through generations around flickering hearths and in isolated villages, often used to explain sudden deaths or epidemics. It was a cultural landscape ripe for a figure like Vlad, whose historical actions were so extreme and associated with death on such a grand scale to be absorbed into its darkest myths. His extreme cruelty, his association with mass death, and his very name, Son of the Devil, made him a natural, almost inevitable fit for such dark legends. The idea of a ruler who literally drank the lifeblood of his subjects through taxes and terror could easily morph into a literal bloodsucker in the popular imagination, a metaphorical truth becoming a literal horror, a terrifying embodiment of their fears. Bram Stoker, an Irish writer with a keen fascination for the macabre and the supernatural, stumbled upon Vlad's name and reputation in the late 19th century during his extensive research for a new novel. He was reportedly researching Eastern European folklore, specifically tales of the undead and superstitions surrounding them, for a new novel about a supernatural villain. He was particularly struck by the name Dracula and the chilling tales of Vlad's cruelty found in historical texts, notably William Wilkinson's An Account of the Principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia, which briefly mentioned Vlad the Impaler. Stoker ingeniously combined these historical fragments with existing vampire myths, which were gaining popularity in Gothic literature of the time, influenced by works like John Polidori's The Vampire, 1819, and Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla, 1872, which introduced the aristocratic, seductive vampire and created his iconic character, Count Dracula. Stoker's Dracula was a Transylvanian noble. Though the historical Vlad was Wallachian, Stoker likely chose Transylvania for its more exotic, mountainous imagery. A powerful, ancient vampire who fed on human blood to sustain his immortality, could transform into bats or wolves, possessed hypnotic powers, and wielded immense aristocratic charm and menace, a true force of evil. He was a creature of the night, a symbol of aristocratic evil, forbidden desire, and the terrifying unknown, embodying the fears and anxieties of the Victorian era, particularly about foreignness and moral decay. Stoker's novel, published in 1897, was a massive, groundbreaking success, forever cementing the name Dracula with the vampire myth in the Western consciousness. The historical Vlad Țepeș, the Impaler, became inextricably linked with the fictional Count, the Bloodsucker. The complex nuances of 15th century Wallachian politics, Ottoman warfare, and the desperate struggle for survival were largely lost, replaced by a chilling supernatural narrative that captivated audiences worldwide and continues to do so. The historical figure became a mere shadow, a dark inspiration for a far more famous fictional monster, his real atrocities overshadowed by the fantastical.
So, while Vlad Țepeș was indeed a monster, his monstrosity was entirely human, a terrifying product of his brutal upbringing as a hostage, the ruthless, unforgiving politics of his era, and his calculated, systematic use of terror as a tool of governance and defense. He was a man who shed blood on an unprecedented scale, but not to sustain his own life. He did it to maintain power, to enforce a brutal order, and to defend his land against an overwhelming existential enemy. The vampire myth, though powerfully inspired by his terrifying historical legacy, is a separate, fictional creation, a testament to the enduring power of fear, the human imagination, and the way history can be reshaped by legend. The real Dracula was arguably far more terrifying, precisely because he was real,
and his horrors were wrought by human hands. A chilling reminder of the depths of human cruelty and the thin veil between historical fact and enduring nightmare. You've heard of Vlad's infamous cruelty, his forests of stakes, and the chilling efficiency of his impalements. You understand that he was a man who used terror as a primary tool of governance. But what was daily life truly like for the common people of Wallachia under his iron rule? Forget the romanticized, often idealized notions of medieval peasant life, with its simple joys, communal bonds, and predictable rhythms dictated by seasons and church bells. It was a profound paradox, a life lived in constant, paralyzing fear, yet also one of unprecedented, almost unnatural order and, for some, a strange, brutal form of justice that was both terrifying and, in its own twisted way, effective. Congratulations! You are a peasant in Vlad's Wallachia. The good news? Crime is virtually non-existent. The roads are safe, the markets orderly, and petty theft is unheard of. You could leave your purse on the village well, and it would likely remain untouched for days. The bad news, because the punishment for any crime, no matter how minor, is so horrific, so immediate, and so public, you live in perpetual terror of the smallest infraction, a constant self-censorship born of dread that governs every aspect of your existence. Every word, every action, every thought is weighed against the terrifying consequences that could lead to a gruesome public death. Vlad's justice system was not merely efficient, it was simple, swift, and absolute, devoid of the complex legalities, lengthy trials, appeals, or nuanced legal arguments found in other European courts of the time. There were no juries, no presumption of innocence. If you were accused of a crime, you were, for all intents and purposes, guilty until proven innocent. And even then, innocence was a precarious, fleeting state, dependent solely on the prince's whim or the testimony of his ubiquitous spies. The punishment for theft, even petty theft, like stealing a loaf of bread, a handful of grain, or a few coins, was often immediate impalement, a public spectacle designed to terrify and deter. This was not a secret, it was public knowledge, a constant, grim reminder. There are famous accounts, though perhaps embellished, of Vlad testing this absolute deterrence. A golden cup was reportedly left untouched and unguarded at a public fountain in the town square of Târgoviste for days, a testament to the paralyzing fear Vlad inspired, as no one dared to steal it, even out of desperate hunger. This absolute deterrence created an eerie, almost unnatural sense of order and security for those who obeyed, a peace enforced by terror that made Wallachia a unique and terrifying place. The roads were famously safe, a stark contrast to the bandit-infested routes of other medieval lands. Brigands and highwaymen, who preyed on travelers and merchants, were quickly rounded up and impaled, their bodies left as grim warnings along the trade routes, their twisted forms a permanent fixture of the landscape. Merchants, both local and foreign, could travel freely and safely through Wallachia, secure in the knowledge that their goods were safe from robbery, as long as they paid their taxes and customs duties to Vlad. This, ironically, led to a period of relative prosperity and increased trade for Wallachia, as merchants from neighboring regions, weary of the chaos and banditry elsewhere, preferred the brutal safety of Vlad's order over the anarchy of other lands. The economic benefits of such a terrifying peace were undeniable, even if the cost in human lives and dignity was immense. But this order came at a terrible, pervasive price. Everyone, from the highest boyar to the lowest peasant, lived under the constant, suffocating threat of Vlad's unpredictable, often arbitrary wrath. His spies were everywhere, a vast, unseen network of informants, listening for whispers of disloyalty, for complaints about his rule, for any sign of defiance, idleness, or perceived disrespect. Even minor transgressions, a grumble, a lazy day in the fields, a perceived slight, or a failure to show sufficient reverence, could lead to a summons to the prince's court, a terrifying prospect that often ended on a stake. There are chilling accounts, likely exaggerated, but reflecting the pervasive fear of Vlad inviting beggars, the sick, and the infirm to a great feast, ostensibly to show charity and cleanse the land. He would then lock the doors and burn them all alive, believing he was cleansing the land of idleness, disease, and unproductive mouths, a twisted form of social engineering that horrified even his contemporaries. While the historical veracity of such tales is debated, their widespread circulation illustrates the profound, paralyzing fear he instilled in his subjects, making them believe he was capable of anything, reinforcing his image as a ruthless purifier. Taxes were collected rigorously, with an efficiency previously unknown in Wallachia. Vlad demanded absolute obedience and a steady, reliable flow of revenue to fund his military campaigns against the Ottomans and maintain his court. Failure to pay or attempts at tax evasion were met with severe and immediate penalties, often involving impalement. The common people were forced to labor tirelessly in their fields, to serve in his army when called, often without pay, and to endure his brutal justice without question, their lives entirely at his mercy. Even the smallest act of defiance could mean the end. Despite the terror, there was a strange, paradoxical sense of security for the honest, hard-working peasant. As long as you obeyed Vlad's laws, paid your taxes, and committed no crime, you were relatively safe from internal threats. The boyars, who had once exploited and terrorized the common people with impunity, seizing their lands and goods, were now themselves terrified of Vlad, their power broken, their ability to oppress severely curtailed. This created a paradoxical situation, where the common folk, while living under a brutal tyrant, might have experienced a degree of stability, safety, and protection from brigands and corrupt officials that they had never known before. It was a trade-off, absolute terror from above for relative peace below, a peace enforced by the constant threat of a gruesome death. However, this stability was fragile, built entirely on a foundation of absolute fear. The constant sight of impaled bodies, the knowledge that any misstep, any perceived slight, could lead to a gruesome end permeated every aspect of daily life. Children grew up with these grim spectacles as part of their landscape, their innocence replaced by a chilling understanding of power and mortality. Laughter was often hushed, conversations guarded, and genuine joy was a fleeting private emotion, rarely expressed openly. Life was about survival, about navigating the prince's unpredictable moods, and about hoping you never drew his attention for the wrong reasons. This was the dragon's justice, a terrifying peace enforced by the omnipresent shadow of the stake, a grim testament to the lengths a ruler would go to impose his will and maintain order in a chaotic world, leaving a lasting psychological scar on his people.
You've witnessed Vlad's meteoric rise, his reign of terror, and his brutal yet effective defense of Wallachia against the Ottoman behemoth. You've seen how he wielded fear as a weapon, transforming his principality into an eerie bastion of order. But even the most feared and ruthless ruler cannot escape the shifting tides of power, the insidious nature of political intrigue, and the ultimate inevitability of betrayal. Vlad Țepeș, the Impaler, met an end as violent, mysterious, and fittingly ironic as his life, a testament to the myriad enemies he made and the volatile, unforgiving world he inhabited. His own brutality, once his strength, became his ultimate weakness, alienating potential supporters and providing ample ammunition for his enemies. Forget the romanticized notion of a glorious last stand, a heroic charge against overwhelming odds, or a noble sacrifice for his people. Vlad's downfall was a complex, multi-layered web of political machinations, constantly shifting alliances, and the relentless grinding pressure from both the formidable Ottoman Empire and his supposed Christian allies, who often feared him as much as they needed him. The very terror he instilled, while effective in the short term, created a deep-seated resentment that would ultimately contribute to his undoing. His greatest victory, the audacious night attack against Sultan Mehmed II in 1462, ironically led to his temporary downfall. While it forced the mighty Sultan to retreat from Wallachia, it also left the principality devastated by the scorched earth policy and utterly exhausted by constant warfare. The land was barren, the people displaced, and the economy shattered. The population, though terrified into obedience, was also suffering immensely. More importantly, it exposed Vlad's vulnerability and the limits of his brutal methods. Mehmed, a shrewd and pragmatic ruler, unable to defeat Vlad militarily on the battlefield, turned to a more insidious weapon, political maneuvering and the exploitation of internal dissent. He installed Vlad's younger brother, Radu the Handsome, as a rival claimant to the Wallachian throne. Radu, who had grown up in the Ottoman court, was loyal to the Sultan and offered a more palatable, less brutal alternative to Vlad's terrifying rule, appealing to those tired of the constant impalements and endless wars. Radu's charm and Ottoman backing proved to be a powerful counterpoint to Vlad's terror. Many Wallachian boyars, tired of Vlad's relentless tyranny, his constant impalements, and the economic devastation caused by his wars, and seeing an opportunity to regain their lost power and privileges, began to defect to Radu's side. They saw Radu as a means to restore their traditional rights, reclaim their lands, and escape Vlad's iron grip. Even some of Vlad's former allies, like the powerful King Matthias Corvinus of Hungary, grew increasingly wary of his extreme methods and his unpredictable, often uncontrollable nature. Matthias, who had initially supported Vlad against the Ottomans, arrested him in 1462, ostensibly for treason and for allegedly making secret deals with the Ottomans. However, many historians believe it was a cynical political move to appease the boyars, consolidate his own influence in Wallachia by removing a powerful and unpredictable vassal, and perhaps even seize some of Vlad's legendary wealth, which was rumored to be vast and tempting. This betrayal by a supposed ally was a crushing blow. Vlad spent the next 12 years, 1462 to 1474, imprisoned in Hungary, a bitter and humiliating period for a man who craved absolute power and freedom. He was held in various castles, including Visegrad and Buda, under relatively comfortable conditions for a prisoner of his standing, but it was still captivity, a gilded cage. He was allowed to read,
to study and even to marry a Hungarian noblewoman. But his spirit remained restless, his mind consumed by thoughts of revenge and reclaiming his throne. During this time, Wallachia was ruled by a succession of princes, including Radu the Handsome, often under heavy Ottoman influence, further eroding the independence Vlad had fought so brutally to establish. This prolonged period of captivity undoubtedly fueled his paranoia and his desire for revenge, hardening his resolve even further, transforming him from a fierce ruler into a caged predator waiting for his moment.
His final return to power was brief, a fleeting glimpse of his former glory, and ultimately tragic. In 1475, with renewed Hungarian support, as Matthias once again saw him as a useful tool against the Ottomans, who were threatening Hungary's borders and needed a strong Wallachian buffer, Vlad was released and launched a final, desperate campaign to reclaim his throne. He managed to defeat the Ottoman-backed ruler and once again became Prince of Wallachia, a testament to his enduring will and military skill even after years of imprisonment. But his third reign lasted only a few tumultuous months, a mere flicker before the darkness consumed him, a final desperate act on the stage of history. The exact circumstances of his death are shrouded in mystery and conflicting accounts, adding to the macabre allure of his legend. The most widely accepted version is that he was killed in battle against the Ottomans and their Wallachian allies, likely defected boyars who saw his return as a renewed threat to their power and their lives, in late December 1476 or early January 1477, near Bucharest. Some accounts suggest he was ambushed by boyars who had secretly defected to the Ottoman side, tired of his cruelty and the endless warfare, seeing him as a perpetual source of instability. Other accounts claim he was accidentally killed by one of his own men during a skirmish, mistaken for an enemy. His head was allegedly cut off and sent to Constantinople as a gruesome trophy for Sultan Mehmed II, who had it impaled on a stake outside the city walls as a public display of victory, a chillingly ironic end for the master of impalement, a final macabre act in his own style. His final return to power was brief, a fleeting glimpse of his former glory, and ultimately tragic. In 1475, with renewed Hungarian support, as Matthias once again saw him as a useful tool against the Ottomans, who were threatening Hungary's borders and needed a strong Wallachian buffer, Vlad was released and launched a final, desperate campaign to reclaim his throne. He managed to defeat the Ottoman-backed ruler and once again became Prince of Wallachia, a testament to his enduring will and military skill even after years of imprisonment. But his third reign lasted only a few tumultuous months, a mere flicker before the darkness consumed him, a final, desperate act on the stage of history. The exact circumstances of his death are shrouded in mystery and conflicting accounts, adding to the macabre allure of his legend. The most widely accepted version is that he was killed in battle against the Ottomans and their Wallachian allies, likely defected boyars who saw his return as a renewed threat to their power and their lives, in late December 1476 or early January 1477, near Bucharest. Some accounts suggest he was ambushed by boyars who had secretly defected to the Ottoman side, tired of his cruelty and the endless warfare, seeing him as a perpetual source of instability. Other accounts claim he was accidentally killed by one of his own men during a skirmish, mistaken for an enemy. His head was allegedly cut off and sent to Constantinople as a gruesome trophy for Sultan Mehmed II, who had it impaled on a stake outside the city walls as a public display of victory. A chillingly ironic end for the master of impalement, a final macabre act in his own style. Other legends claim he was assassinated by a Saxon merchant seeking revenge for the impalements, or even by a mythical vampire hunter, further blurring the lines between history and folklore and adding to the mystique. His burial site is also a mystery, with various monasteries in Wallachia claiming to hold his remains, including the Snagov Monastery, where a headless skeleton was found, adding another layer of ambiguity to his story. This lack of a definitive end only adds to his legend, allowing the myths to flourish and evolve over centuries, making him an eternal figure of dread, forever elusive. Vlad Țepeș died as he lived, violently, surrounded by enemies, and with his true motives and exact fate obscured by the chaos and political intrigue of his era. His death marked the end of an era of brutal personal rule in Wallachia, but his legacy, both historical and mythical, was just beginning to take root in the collective imagination. The dragon had fallen, but his shadow would continue to haunt the imagination for centuries to come, a testament to the terrifying impact of his life and the enduring power of his name, a name that would forever be associated with both historical horror and supernatural dread.
You've witnessed the rise and fall of Vlad Țepeș, from his brutal upbringing as an Ottoman hostage to his violent end, and the chilling methods that earned him his infamous name. You've seen how he shaped Wallachia through terror and defended it with ruthless cunning. But even in death, his legacy endured, morphing into a powerful legend that continues to fascinate and intrigue us today, blurring the lines between historical tyrant and supernatural monster, a testament to the enduring power of a truly terrifying figure. His story, a tapestry woven from fact and fiction, continues to cast a long, dark shadow over the modern world. Forget the simple historical facts for a moment. The enduring global power of Vlad Țepeș lies in his transformation into Dracula, the vampire. Bram Stoker's seminal novel, published in 1897, was the undeniable catalyst, but it built upon centuries of existing Eastern European folklore and Vlad's own terrifying historical reputation. The name Dracula, itself meaning son of the dragon, or more ominously, son of the devil, provided the perfect linguistic and symbolic bridge between the historical figure and the supernatural entity. This masterful fusion cemented his place in popular culture as the quintessential vampire, forever linking the remote lands of Wallachia and Transylvania with Gothic horror, bloodlust, and the chilling unknown. Stoker's genius was in taking a real historical monster and giving him a supernatural, aristocratic veneer that resonated deeply with Victorian anxieties about foreignness, aristocracy, and moral decay, creating a timeless villain. Historical legacy. Despite the monstrous reputation that dominates Western perception, Vlad Țepeș is viewed by many Romanians as a complex, often tragic, national hero. His brutal methods, while undeniably horrifying and a source of historical debate, are often seen in the context of the desperate times he lived in, a necessary evil to maintain independence and order against the overwhelming might of the Ottoman Empire,
which threatened to engulf all Europe and erase Wallachian identity. He unified Wallachia, brought a period of unprecedented internal stability, albeit through terror, and stood as a formidable bulwark against Ottoman expansion into Europe, buying crucial time for other Christian states to organize their defenses and resist the tide. His military strategies, particularly his scorched earth tactics, guerrilla warfare, and psychological operations, like the Forest of Stakes, were remarkably effective against a numerically superior enemy, demonstrating a ruthless genius for survival and statecraft in an era of constant existential threat. He is remembered as a strong, if cruel, ruler who put Wallachia's interests above all else, a figure of fierce national pride, albeit one tinged with the darker aspects of his reign. Architectural legacy. His physical legacy is tangible and dramatic, silent witnesses to his iron will and strategic mind. The ruins of Poinari Citadel, perched precariously on a mountain peak in the Carpathian Mountains, accessible by a daunting 1,480-step climb, stand as a testament to his forced labor and strategic vision, a grim monument to his will and the suffering he inflicted. It is a place that physically embodies his reign of terror. Other castles and fortifications he strengthened or built across Wallachia also bear his mark, including parts of the princely court in Târgovist, his capital, which features the Chindia Tower, often associated with Vlad. These structures are not just ruins, they are echoes of his iron rule, standing against the test of time, drawing historians and tourists alike, seeking to touch a piece of his brutal history.
Literary and cultural impact. Beyond Stoker's novel, Vlad Țepeș has inspired countless books, movies, television series, video games, comics, and documentaries across genres from horror to historical fiction. He is a recurring, iconic figure in popular culture, endlessly reinterpreted and reimagined to suit contemporary fears and fascinations. His story taps into primal human fears, the fear of the unknown, the fear of absolute, unchecked power, the fear of betrayal, and the dark, violent side of human nature. The enduring fascination with him continues to draw tourists from around the world to Romania, eager to explore the historical sites associated with the real Dracula, seeking to understand the man behind the myth, to walk in the shadow of the Impaler, and perhaps to feel a shiver down their spine. His influence can be seen in the very fabric of the vampire genre, shaping how we perceive these creatures of the night, from their aristocratic demeanor to their association with Transylvania and their bloodthirsty nature. He remains a cornerstone of horror literature and cinema. The enduring mystery. Despite extensive historical research and countless academic debates, certain aspects of Vlad's life and death remain shrouded in mystery, contributing significantly to his mystique and allowing the legend to persist. His true burial place, for instance, is still a subject of contention, with various monasteries in Wallachia claiming to hold his remains, including the Snagov Monastery, where a headless skeleton was found, adding another layer of ambiguity to his story. The full extent of his atrocities is also debated, as many accounts are biased and exaggerated by his enemies, making it difficult to separate fact from propaganda. The precise motivations behind some of his more extreme acts are still debated by historians,
Was he a devout Christian defending his faith, a sadistic psychopath who reveled in cruelty, or a pragmatic ruler using terror as a necessary tool to maintain order and deter powerful enemies in a brutal age? This ambiguity, this lingering uncertainty, only adds to his allure, allowing the myths and legends to continue to flourish and evolve, adapting to new generations and new fears, ensuring that the name Dracula remains synonymous with terror, a name whispered in the dark. Vlad Țepeș, though officially dead for centuries, never truly vanished from the collective consciousness. His legacy, woven from threads of undeniable historical fact, brutal truth, and captivating legend, continues to resonate across cultures and time. He reminds us of a time when survival demanded unimaginable cruelty, when rulers were forged in the crucible of constant warfare, and when a single man could cast such a long, dark shadow over both history and folklore. So tonight, as you drift off to sleep, perhaps you'll ponder the real horrors of his reign, the chilling efficiency of his terror, or the whispers of the vampire he became. You wouldn't have lasted a day in his Wallachia, but his story, in all its terrifying, blood-soaked glory, lives on, forever restless, a testament to the enduring power of a truly legendary figure who transcended history to become a timeless symbol of fear.